Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Fall Lecture Series for 2025, brought to you by Impact Employment Solutions. My name is Carrie Soden. I'm the Director of Archaeology and Research here at the National Museum of the Great Lakes. Thank you all for signing up and showing up. And please don't forget, you can always still give at nmgl.org/donate. Nobody ever is excited about that part. No, I don't get said again. For those of you online, thank you for being here. Tonight is the second of our fall lecture series for 2025 in our brand new Great Lakes Community Education Center with these lovely, nice, soft, cushiony chairs. Don't forget, for those of you online, if you need closed captions, just turn them on with the control bar at the bottom of your screen. If you have any issues with the Zoom portion, please log out and log back in. That seems to fix most of the problems that we have.
I haven't been closed caption before. You have the beep button?
No.
No? Okay.
If anything were to happen to your feed tonight, please be aware that we are recording this and we will have it up on our YouTube channel by Monday morning at the latest. And I will send a link out to all of the registered participants when it goes up. We will have a Q&A at the end of this talk. For those of you here, raise your hand. For those of you online, don't raise your hand. Just put a question into the Q&A and I will work on getting that answered. Tonight, we get a 2-for-1, 2 speakers, 1 presentation. And because it's a 2-for-1, I shortened their bios way down. So again, I don't think either of these are super strangers to a lot of you. First, we have Paul LaMarre, who is the director of the Port of Monroe, vice president of the board of directors here at the National Museum of the Great Lakes, and possibly the biggest boat nerd I have ever met in my life.
Awesome.
With him is Chris Winters, a photojournalist, author, and lifelong Great Lakes historian, and maybe the second biggest boat nerd I've ever met in my life.
Sitting right there.
Well, no, Roger.
I'm
Yes.
Maybe third.
Yeah, Roger is the king.
This gentleman, though, did name 3 of his children after Great Lakes boats. So
I have a very indulgent wife.
Their program tonight is a preview of a forthcoming publication and the results of years of research and, let's be honest, obsession. Paul has a long history with Colonel James M. Schoonmaker and was in charge of the vessel when it was the Boyer, and worked with many, but led its return to the Schoonmaker and helped bring that boat here to the National Museum of the Great Lakes. Throughout that process, his interest in the Shenango Company, the company that owned the Schoonmaker, and 5 other vessels became his passion. This is that story. Okay, did I go too many? There we go.
Get out of here.
I'll let you give the intro and then we'll get rolling. We could also do stand-up, so by the time we're done, you'll see this works out pretty good.
My old buddy here and I we were introduced. We met. It's 15 years ago now, and we knew of each other for some years, and too loud. Oh, not loud enough.
Not loud enough.
Okay. I did not know it when I started off on my quest. I did not know that the Shenango Furnace Company would bring would unite the 2 of us in our mutual obsession. It's hard. I'm having a hard time articulating how complex this story actually is. I'm going to back myself up just a little bit. You may have noticed out on the table there is a book called Centennial. That was my first book, which was published in 2009. That was when Paul and I met. And I've been a boat nerd my whole life. And St. Mary's Challenger, which is the pilothouse that's out in the new exhibit here, was at the time the oldest operational steamship in the world, as far as we could tell. She was when I started the project in the late 90s, she was approaching her 100-year anniversary, and I went with the boat for 5 years. I'm a commercial photographer by trade, and I photographed life on the boat for the 5 years leading up to the
You're
Centennial.
My favorite photographer.
You have to say that. And so I did not know. I'm always amazed. Some years, it's 22 years later now, that book could have been an epic disaster because I really didn't know what I was doing, and I gambled my house on the printing. And
he literally mortgaged his house.
But it thankfully it came through okay. And
we're not doing that with this
one. That won't.
Thank you.
It was a proof of concept, and I figured I didn't have kids at the time. I'll either go broke trying, or this will work. And I could never have imagined that was an all-consuming effort for 6 or 7 years. I would never have imagined that an entire second act would unfold in a way that was not terribly telling the story the first time was very premeditated, very strategic. The tale, the second act, has sort of unfolded naturally, and I've just had to sort of follow along as the story has unfolded, and it's unfolded, I think you would agree, in some very unusual and unexpected and impossible you could not sit down to write a story like this. You could not create fiction. So I'll let Paul handle this slide. That's Uncle Paulie there as a young.
First of all, I just want to say how much we appreciate you all being here at the museum. As a kid who, when we did the ribbon cutting on our second wave expansion here, when I spoke, I said that in the darkest days of trying to save the Willis B. Boyer and Colonel James M. Schoonmaker, I literally knelt in the pilot house of that vessel and prayed that the ship would be saved, that we would be able to tell this message. And ultimately, it has evolved into something where we have become part of the fabric of the story. And you are all the next chapter, the next book, the next piece of the history of the National Museum of the Great Lakes. I am hugely thankful. There are people in this room that are hugely impactful in my life. Most important of which is my wife, Julie, over here, who is the most patient woman I have ever met. I love her dearly. Could not do any of it without her. This story, and we didn't really realize it, even a picture that I found yesterday that I sent to Chris, Shenango, because of my father. So go back real quick. My father, Paul C. LaMarre Jr., who literally I tell every day, he tells me, you need to slow down. You're doing too much. The port, the museum, the tugs, the this, the that. And I tell him that it's all his fault. Period. It is all his fault. And that is because my dad, I am now the third generation of our family within the Great Lakes maritime industry. This is his artwork, and this is very fitting because it hung over our fireplace mantel when I was a kid, and that's the steamer Shenango, which was the Queen of the Lakes in 1909, and a woven St. Lawrence Canaler called the George C. Howe that was captained by our great uncle Frank Hoffman. It survived the 1913 storm, and it was regaled in my great-grandfather's living room with my great-grandmother and my great-aunt about how he survived the great storm of 1913 on Lake Superior with his dog Prince tied to his belt with his leash so he wouldn't get washed overboard. Shenango, and why my dad found it to be so impactful, was that at the time of our family members early sailing in the industry, those were the vessels that they were revered. They were the largest. They were the most elegant. They represented a fully integrated company with an unprecedented history. And so, of course, my dad, his artwork there, he's regarded as one of the masters of Great Lakes marine art over the course of the last 150 years. His artwork is not only in corporate offices, but throughout the National Museum of the Great Lakes, other museums around the Great Lakes. And it's really one of my favorite things in the entire world. It truly is. It's what brings it all home for me. Our house we actually, one of his paintings, we have a 14-foot mural of one of his paintings in our living room. Again, I have a very patient, wonderful wife. So adding on to her patience and support is this fireplace. You see me as a young lad there standing in front of our family fireplace, which was the actual fireplace from the steamer Shenango, which is in our home today, and had the builder's plate from the Colonel James M. Schoonmaker above it, and later a model of the Schoonmaker for my entire upbringing. So when the Schoonmaker became a museum as the Boyer, my dad would bring me to the Boyer after usually going to the Toledo Zoo first, and would take us there and say it was like going to the Church of the Great Lakes. It was like going to church to pay your respects to the history of the Great Lakes and your family. It was a special place to be revered. And he would always point out wherever the cliff's paint was peeling, how you could see the green showing through. I was 5 years old at that time, 4 years old in this picture, and you'll see how this story evolves. Now let's see your kid picture, mister.
Well, the reason Paul's going to do most of the talking tonight, I'm kind of a dud because I've been driving for the last 48 hours. My story started at age 9, and the hook for me was the Edmund Fitzgerald. I've been chasing around our new 50th anniversary retrospective book.
You have the book?
I have one copy.
Yeah, copy of the book, which
So,
we'll be speaking on at the museum.
Yeah, that's
November 8th.
right.
Is that correct?
Correct, on the 8th, yes.
That book was edited by a wonderful guy.
Yes, you're thick as thieves.
No, we're brothers, really. We're very blessed.
And so I'm a little thick this evening. You'll forgive me. So this is me at the age of 9 on the Valley Camp up at the Sioux with the lifeboat from the Fitzgerald. I've been a big reader my whole life, and I'm pretty sure I bought the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald that day. If any of you have ever read that book by Fred Stonehouse, and I must have read it 10,000 times between the age of 9 and high school, and I've been writing that book in my head for 30, almost 40 years now. And so there's the first copy after all this
Literally
time.
off the press is the first copy to make it from the printer.
So now talking about I was mentioning Centennial. I was shooting at the time for a magazine called Seaway Review. And I do a lot of shooting at the shipyard in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. And at that time they had the old Mackinac, the real Mackinac. She was going on the dry dock for her last 5-year inspection. This was 2003. And so I went up there with my camera to get some photos of her unique bow propeller. And that same evening, the boat at that time, it's confusing. Great Lakes ships, as many of you may know, have multiple names because they go on for 100 years. Sometimes they might have, in the case of the Challenger, she had 6 names. So it's confusing when I try to explain to people what I'm talking about. I feel badly because I'm always using often different names. So I usually shorten it to just Challenger. When she came into the shipyard in 2003, she was the Southdown Challenger. She had been the Medusa Challenger for many years. Prior to that, she had been the Alex Chilton, then the Elton Hoyt II. Then she was originally the William P. Snyder, who was the patriarch of the Snyder clan, the founder of the Shenango Furnace Company. She was the first vessel built for the company in 1906. So I took this sunset shot, and it occurred to me as I was driving home that night that this was in 2003, and the vessel gets a 5-year certificate if she passes the inspection. So doing the math in my head,
Come on. Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting.
It is.
There
Yeah.
it is.
This side is the one
Yeah,
showing.
okay.
That is okay. We're
I'm
good.
tired, I told you. So I did the math in my usually tired brain, and I thought, well, this is entirely possible. They've spent $1 million to put the boat in the dry dock. It'll go at this stage, barring the totally unforeseen, it'll sail 100 years, and that had never happened. If you're a real hardcore, you know the E.M. Ford, which was another cement boat. She was launched in 1898. She sailed until 1996 before being turned into a storage hull. So for the first time, cement is a very finicky cargo. That's why cement boats have always been the vessels competing for the title of world's oldest or oldest on the Great Lakes. So this, as I mentioned, this is the cover of Centennial. This, for me, from a creative standpoint, was an interesting time because I had been trained in traditional photography starting in the early 1990s. I did not know, but I was going to kind of come through what turned out to be very much of a revolutionary sort of a quantum shift in photography, the move away from traditional film, celluloid film and traditional tools into the digital age. And the thing that I did my first project on the Edward L. Ryerson in the early 2000s in traditional fashion with a large format.
And lived on the Ryerson for how long?
About a year. And with an old-fashioned Matthew Brady it had the two standards, and you focused on a ground glass under a horse blanket. And it was clear to me, I did one trip on the Wilfred Sykes after I did the Ryerson project, and it was clear to me that that method was not going to work on a working ship because no one was going to hold still while I took meter readings and exposed proof Polaroids. And not 90%, 80%, 70% of what goes on in a ship goes on in the dark or the almost dark. And film was just not a very effective medium in low light or mixed lighting, or certainly at night. Providentially, in 2003, the same time it occurred to me that the Challenger might break the 100-year barrier, Canon came out with the first digital camera that was as good as what I was used to using in my medium and large format cameras. So once again, I mortgaged everything I owned and I got myself the Canon camera, and I was then off and running and able to, it was pretty evident, unlike many things, it was pretty evident early on that this was an exceptional story, and I was in the right place at the right time with the right tools to tell the story in a way that you could not have done even 3 or 5 years before. You may recognize, if you've been in the exhibit, this shot was taken in the winter of 2004 at Charlevoix, Michigan. As I mentioned, powdered cement is a finicky cargo, and most cement silos are up rivers, up tributary rivers. So a small vessel, relatively speaking, the Challenger was only 550 feet long. A small vessel is actually more economical because it can make its way up these small tributary rivers, including Toledo here and Milwaukee and Grand Haven, small ports. And these smaller ships, older ships, can under their own power without tugs make it up to these silos.
So tugs are really recommended.
Then I shouldn't badmouth tugs. Yeah. I'll do this one quickly. This is another perfect example. I was thinking in the car of I was straddling this quantum shift. How lucky we are. This is a photo of the William P. Snyder
straddling in our
yes. There was a company in Detroit, the Detroit Publishing Company. They specialized in high quality postcards at the turn of the century. They sent their photographers with top shelf equipment all over the country, and these images survived and wound up in the Library of Congress. So because they were based in Detroit, they sent their photographers down to the Great Lakes Engineering Works, where the Challenger was built in 1906. So we have this lovely large format image of the Snyder there to the left being built in 1906. Not only a photo, but a really high quality photo. Now, the tragedy, or the difficult thing to reconcile now, I knew these images existed, or I found them finally where the originals resided. And I paid the Library of Congress to have copies made from the original glass plate negatives. It cost something like $2,500 to do that. Now you can download these images for free from the Library of Congress. They are in the public domain, and they are absolutely free to one and all taxpayers. So that is and it's great to have access to this stuff, but I'm a little frustrated having had to pay through the nose back in the day. Now, it's interesting, that photo I showed you, I knew resided at the Library of Congress. These 4 images, the first mate on the Challenger he was a real steamboat buff, and he's a 5th generation lake sailor, and he had these 4 images in his collection, and they had been duplicated by an old boat nerd from Milwaukee who was a graphic arts cameraman, and they had this very heavy lithography screen on them, which made them difficult to reproduce. And the mystery became, where did these originals come from? These are pictures of the William P. Snyder from 1906. They were obviously in some sort of folio or guest album. And where could we obtain copies of these originals? And I never did find them for Centennial. I had to struggle to reproduce the lithoed versions that I had. So this story will pick up again. Just bear with us here, and will resolve itself in a kind of an extraordinary way some years later. These are the first images I took of the Challenger with the large format camera. I did not realize that you had to use a large capacity strobe equipment. I did not realize that the Challenger had a very unique and ancient DC electrical system. So I destroyed all of the fuses in the after end of the boat with my lighting equipment. And the chief engineer was not super pleased and threw an oily rag at me at one point. Another image taken with the big camera. And then this is the image I always use to illustrate. This was taken with that Canon digital. I'm standing on a bridge that's bouncing as the cars go over it. This is South Chicago, shooting a moving target at dawn where you've just got that very anemic twilight. And this shot would have been a fool's errand with a film camera. But with that new Canon equipment, you have a lovely, sharp image that's able to freeze that action and the mood, which you just could not do on film unless everything became very artificial. Here's the 100-year. This was on the morning of the 100-year anniversary at Charlevoix. Absolutely no fanfare. I couldn't get anyone excited. I tried to get the newspapers, anyone, do a story. This is an amazing tale. No one. I got 0% interest, even in Charlevoix, in places where the boat has been going in and out for 40 years. So it's a part of this, for me, part of the good vibrations insofar as the second act, the second half of the story is finally people seem to get it. Thanks to Paul's efforts and the Schoonmaker and this museum and now the new exhibit, people finally seem to have got it. So I'll let you take over for a while. This is the cover of our book.
Yes, our
coming
book,
soon.
Living Legacy of the Shenango Furnace Fleet. And what's so cool about the Living Legacy is that when Chris and I first got in touch and he was working on Centennial, he was looking for materials related to the history of the Shenango Furnace Company. And I think that we were connected by Roger at the time, almost undoubtedly. And it became very apparent that we had exceptionally similar interests, but it also became apparent that the Shenango story was one that was worth telling. Now, the cover of the book, the name of the book, Iron Diamonds. You'll see in a moment that one of the most impactful people in my life, other than my father, was William P. Snyder III, who was the last president of the Shenango Furnace Company. Through this entire process, we became very, very close friends. He told folks that I was his adopted grandson. And Bill Snyder used to carry a polished iron ore agate in his pocket. And he kept it there as a reminder of what had made his family, what had built America, what had allowed his family to have a fully integrated steel company that at one point was one of the largest in Pittsburgh. And these vessels carried iron ore and created value out of it as if it was a diamond. It is also only fitting then that their logo is a diamond and was referred to as the Diamond Fleet. The pictures that you see on the back cover are from a book that Bill Snyder had published in the 50s called This is Shenango. All of the original artwork from that book actually resides on the Schoonmaker and is on exhibit.
It's really good, too.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
The most famous picture ever taken of the Shenango Fleet, and this is a real rarity. You didn't typically ever see a photo of an entire fleet in one place at the same time. This was April 14th, 1917, in the port of Cleveland, after the fleet was just coming out of winter layup. Some of them had a storage load of grain, others were light. But you see our Colonel James M. Schoonmaker, William P. Snyder Jr., Shenango, Snyder, and Wilpin. Wilpin for William Penn Snyder. The Schoonmaker, of course, is our flagship, the National Museum of the Great Lakes. Her twin, the William P. Snyder Jr., was built in 1912, 1 year after her. The Shenango, whose fireplace you saw that little kid standing by, was built in 1909. It was the largest ship on the Great Lakes before that. The Snyder that is the St. Mary's Challenger, whose pilot house is sitting on the corner, and the Wilpon that was built in 1907. Those boats are regarded as 5 of the most regal and elegant vessels inside and out to ever have sailed the Great Lakes. I tell folks that really there were 6 ships in Great Lakes history that were the most elegant above all others. Colonel James M. Schoonmaker and William P. Snyder Jr., the William A. Irvin, that is a museum ship up in Duluth, and her twin, the Governor Miller, then the Benson Ford and the Henry Ford II that were with the Ford Motor Company. Those were the platforms for taking out the moguls of industry, the folks that built our country. I always, when I was giving tours of the Schoonmaker back when, would tell folks, you weren't king of the world if you were on the Titanic. You were king of the world if you were sitting with William P. Snyder, Frank Rockefeller, having a cigar on the Colonel James M. Schoonmaker as you carry your iron ore cargo down to the lower lakes to get on the New York Central Railroad owned by Colonel James M. Schoonmaker to make steel that ultimately placed you at the Duquesne Club having cocktails with Andrew Carnegie in Pittsburgh. That's the king of the world. The Boyer. It's interesting because
let me just interject here. We're trying to tell, we have what I always refer to as an embarrassment of riches with the second act. This part of the story could have a book all by itself. The saving of the Schoonmaker.
It was really, really cool.
Well, I'll apologize
bear with us. So what is our timing like, Carrie?
Yeah.
Not really, because I don't care. But I mean, I want to be considerate. Okay, well, what's everybody's timeline like? When do you want to get out of here? So, no, my goal is that everybody be on the road by 8:30. Okay, at the very latest, and it will be well worth it. I promise, because this story does take that little extra bit. So the Willis B. Boyer. When I took over as the executive director of the Willis B. Boyer in 2006, the ship was in a dire condition. She had 60,000 gallons of water in her starboard ballast tanks. She was sitting on the bottom. Her gangways were breaking. Her decks were deteriorated. And we started a grassroots campaign with a group that later became the board of the Boyers nonprofit, and ultimately many of the founding board members of the National Museum of the Great Lakes. We started a Don't Give Up the Ship campaign to raise awareness. After the first year, I was able to kind of get the ship back on track. And then after that first year, I was told that I no longer had a job and that the vessel was going to be scrapped. There was a particular famous mayor who made that decision. We get along now, but not so much back then. And what was cool was the Don't Give Up the Ship campaign is I had at the time Howard Pinkley in Point Place make the largest Oliver Perry Don't Give Up the Ship flag that you have ever seen. It was like this big so that you could see it from the 22nd floor in Government Center every single day. And really, in that exact year, the Brig Niagara came to support the ship and raise funds and raise awareness. And it was at the same time that the National Museum of the Great Lakes, then the Great Lakes Historical Society of Vermilion with the Inland Seas Maritime Museum, was looking to create something bigger. At the same time, in all of this, again, it's almost too much. This building, I was given this building by our port director, Jim Hartung, under my responsibility. And I was told, you've done such a good job with the Boyer. Here's this building, make it a success. And by the way, you have no budget. So I had to figure out how not to lose my mind at the time. And you'll see a drawing when you walk into the front lobby of the museum that was actually done on a restaurant placemat. Tom Walton did a really cool editorial about it. And that drawing, which looks exactly like what we have here today, even with the tug, that was the foundation for creating this with GLHS and with the Schoonmaker when rechristened. She was in a really rough spot. When we started to transform her, now you got to think about our original restoration goal was about $250,000 to do what was really, to a certain extent, a cosmetic restoration. But, and I think about it now, I don't often go out and tell this story. It's why it will be great to have it in a book that folks can read at home. and get home, get to bed early, read before bed, right? So the story, I was going out to every Kiwanis Club, Rotary, Union Hall, telling the story of the Willis B. Boyer as the Colonel James M. Schoonmaker and why we needed to restore the ship, rechristen her to her original namesake of a Congressional Medal of Honor winner at the Battle of Winchester, and why she was Toledo's flagship. The unions, I went to them and said, if you can fix it, we probably need it fixed. So why not use this vessel as a platform for training your apprentices? We had the sheet metal workers union, the boilermakers, the painters union. Again, if you could fix it, we probably had an issue with it. She was in really, really rough shape. You see Chris's photographs here, and that's the other cool thing about this, is that the friendship that Chris and I developed through Centennial, he was there to chronicle all of this firsthand. And when I look in the room and I think about those that were together for this, in particular, not only our friends that supported us, but from like boots on the ground at some of the most trying moments, you and Carrie and myself. And Carrie took wounds for this.
Carrie took shrapnel.
Carrie took shrapnel. We're going to talk about that. One of the longest.
Those are pictures we don't have in the book.
No, we don't. But this has not been an easy journey. Again, I told you I was in such a dire spot that I was praying for
deliverance.
No, really, really. In this case, the salvation of the ship and the return of the diamond onto the stack of the Colonel James M. Schoonmaker for the first time since 1969. And what's interesting about this is that a gentleman who actually lived on the Schoonmaker when he was a child, Bill Wilcox, we're in the midst of this restoration, and all of a sudden this camper shows up in the parking lot in International Park where we were moored. It's a guy, his girlfriend, 2 dogs, and a cat in a camper. And it's right down at the aft end of the Schoonmaker, still kind of the Boyer Schoonmaker at that time. Bill Wilcox actually lived on the ship because his father was first mate and relief captain and ship keeper in the winter. He showed me news articles of he and his brother going down the gangway of the Schoonmaker to go to school. He became a great friend. And he literally sat in that parking lot for weeks as the ship was transformed back to what he knew as a kid right in front of him. It was awesome. His father, Arthur Wilcox, his picture's in the wheelhouse of the Schoonmaker. His license is in the wheelhouse of the Schoonmaker. And Bill has since passed. But he gave me his entire archival family collection, much of which is featured in the book. Another amazing event.
Hottest day in the history of the universe.
So July 1st, 1911, the launching and christening of the ship by Gretchen Schoonmaker, daughter of Colonel James M. Schoonmaker. It was said to be one of the hottest days on record when that happened. Interestingly enough, 100 years later, it was the exact same thing. But in attendance, not only did we have James M. Schoonmaker II, whose mother had christened the vessel in 1911, we had William P. Snyder III, who was the grandson of William P. Snyder, for whom the Challenger's original namesake was named for. It was the first time the 2 grandsons had ever been in the same place together. Chris and I got to experience, it was the coolest part of the whole thing for me, because I had them out to dinner together and they sat together and they were telling stories to one another about, how, your mother used to holler at the colonel because he would jump and swim underwater in the pool, the whole length of the pool when he was super old. And she was always worried. It was all this little stuff that was so neat to see these guys together for the first time, whose grandfathers were true captains of industry. And what's amazing when we talk about the christening itself is that, well, and we've got more pictures coming up, but William P. Snyder III. That's Bill and I in the grill room. Bill said that it was wise to wear red socks. So you can bet your bottom dollar I've got red socks on under these boots tonight, okay? Bill lived to be 97 years old. When he passed, I wrote an article in Inland Seas and said that it was being in the shadow of greatness. There has never been such a large figure that I have ever had the privilege of working with and being around. And if you can imagine, Bill saw the last of his ships go away in 1969, and the Shenango Diamond and the colors and the history evaporate over decades. All of the sudden, in 2011, the Shenango Furnace Company was alive and larger than life right in front of him again. That is a very, very rare and cool opportunity. Tracy Schoonmaker, who to this day with the Schoonmaker Foundation is one of the largest supporters of the National Museum of the Great Lakes. The ship truly would not be here without the Schoonmaker family. They became like family as well. I love Tracy very much, and Ding has since passed. And when she broke that bottle of champagne, she did it at the exact moment that her husband's mother, the colonel's daughter, had done it 100 years earlier. Exact moment. That has never been done in maritime history, ever. Will never be repeated. Taking a ship back to its original namesake 100 years from her launching at the exact moment with the family member of the original sponsor of the christening. Unbelievable. There you can see myself looking much younger, Congressman McCaffrey, Tracy Ding, and our executive director of GLHS at the time, Chris Gilchrist.
That champagne bottle tried to kill Carrie the night
So that
before.
was the story. You score these champagne bottles, they're also wrapped. Carrie could tell the story better, but when I tell the story, she and our head of accounting for the museum at the time are in a hotel room. Carrie scoring the bottles, we're testing it, and all of a sudden across the room, one of the bottles starts to kind of wiggle, make some noise. She goes over to look at it, and the bottle exploded. And it cut her so badly that Carrie and myself and Chris Gilchrist spent the night before the rechristening in the ER with poor Carrie getting stitched up right before the hottest day of the decade. Carrie, we love you. Honestly, Carrie is.
I tell my girls, you have to be as tough as Carrie, okay, honey?
No, seriously, because at this point, with all of the challenges, Carrie and I have been through some stuff together. It's a lot, and her resilience is a huge part of why this museum is here. Now, resilience. I told you there was a young man at the, 27 years old at the time, which also I went through cancer really bad in the middle of all that. So that kind of made things even more purposeful. It really did, because it felt like your last chance to make this mark, to save this history, to do it for your family, and to not give up. Aside from the christening of the ship, the single biggest moment that we ever had was moving the ship. Now, bringing the Schoonmaker to life again, getting the windlasses working to raise her own anchors. It was awesome because they're steam engines, and all of a sudden they're working again. And we've got the radar spinning. The night before, the move was actually occurring on my license. And I, for a day, even though I'm a captain of any number of tugboats today and have sailed a lot myself, for a day, I got to be the captain of the Colonel James M. Schoonmaker that sat on my fireplace mantle as a kid. The Colonel James M. Schoonmaker was underway under that namesake in the Shenango Diamond for the first time since 1969. The night before, we had a horrible rainstorm. And after that rainstorm, that rainbow came on. And it's kind of hard to see on these screens, but there's actually a rainbow there. And just standing there in the silence and the magnitude of the ship the night before we moved her was very touching. And moving the ship the next day. Now, of course, my biggest thing was moving the ship. We had old codgers standing on the shore that day, literally saying, "It's stuck in the mud. You're not going to move it. It's time for this kid." And if you're in the room, I remember it. No. What was so wild is that let's not make this complicated enough. Let's, to thank all of our supporters, put 200 people on the deck of the ship needing life jackets, refreshments, porta-johns, you name it. And the only saving grace for me in this was, and of course, it's great to have everybody there, but this was as stressful as it gets. Not to mention, we had the Coast Guard aboard, and our limits for doing the tow to this location where we had just built a new $2.5 million slip was 10 miles an hour of wind. The wind was blowing 20 miles an hour. And so I had to get with the tug captains, the Coast Guard, and decide whether we went or not. We actually were waiting, and then we finally decided to go. And standing next to me on the bridge wing was the man that put that fireplace in his house, that took his kid to church in Toledo to see the Willis B. Boyer. And both of us were in tears. It was the only time this whole project that I was really in tears, where being on the Colonel James M. Schoonmaker, underway, on her way to her new home at the National Museum of the Great Lakes, going through the MLK Bridge with all of our supporters aboard. And you see the "Don't Give Up the Ship" flag. They could still see it from the 22nd floor when we went by. Because when I first did that drawing and I presented it at the Toledo Chamber, that same guy said that it would be an insult to the Marina District project to put that derelict old ship here. And it's interesting because that ship became the foundation of this entire development that you now see here. These pages of the book are particularly touching to me, or it's life coming full circle, because this was me in the front window of the Schoonmaker going up the river. We literally planned out the move, literally the angles that we would pull her into this dock based on the angles of the walls of the building. So because the tolerances were that tight to bring her in, bring the stern in, connect it to a D8 dozer, and then pull her with the dozer the rest of the way. But we had to support the Great Lakes Towing Company. And what's crazy is that the guy that towed the Schoonmaker was my mentor for the Great Lakes Towing Company, where I am now one of the main captains for Toledo and Detroit. There are 3 ships sitting up at the elevators in Toledo right now. I towed every one of them up there in the last 4 days. And seeing this and life coming full circle, I can tell you, and I know I'm like kind of geeky doing it, but every time I go past the Schoonmaker, I take pictures. I'm so excited. And I tell the guys on the tug, I'm like, "Do you see that? That is the sexiest ship on the Great Lakes right there. They don't make them like that anymore." And that, I always say, is my pride and joy. It is unlike any other museum ship in the country, and she just keeps getting better. There's a picture of the move taken by
The late, great Jim Hoffman.
Who was also a great supporter of the museum and a staple along the Toledo waterfront. The restoration of the grill room, which for anybody that goes aboard the Schoonmaker today sees the wonderful woodwork. Some of it was exposed, much of it was not. The fireplace was not. It was easier to paint over wood in the old days than maintain this beautifully varnished fumed oak paneling. When you go now, it looks exactly as we would have seen in the pictures. The restoration of the engine room was unprecedented. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Actually, in this case, This grant was when they were doing stimulus grants. It was for remediation and restoration of hazardous materials in historic sites. We had asbestos abatement, which I always joke that the boat was built out of asbestos and then everything else was riveted to it. However, the company that got the abatement contract ended up becoming a sponsor because it was so much more than they thought. And the restoration of the engine room took the whole experience on the ship to the next level. It is absolutely beautiful. It's cleaner and nicer than almost any engine room you would see today. And our dedicated volunteers maintain what we did. Now, I mentioned that was a stimulus grant. At that time, again, same kid who was praying to keep this thing around, has 2 U.S. senators come out and say that it's one of the 100 worst stimulus projects in the United States of America in USA Today. It was USA Today. It was really a great day in my career. And that's all right. This is a story about resilience. It's about turning something that came out of the dirt into a diamond. And with that, I'll go back to Mr. Winters, the William P. Snyder, and these photos.
All right, this is another $2,500 black and white.
Whoa! No, but this one's important. So listen, don't go back to.
Oh yeah, this is just amazing. This
The book page actually has what you've done to it. So that's the William P. Snyder along the St. Clair River. Husband and wife, you would think, man waving. I told Chris that if you put 2 golden retrievers in that picture, it would be heaven. And so what did Chris do? He photoshopped that picture, put it on canvas, colored it, and it hangs in our bedroom today because that is heaven.
You may remember I mentioned those mystery photos a bit earlier. This is Wilpon Hall, where Mr. Snyder III resided with his lovely wife until the end of his days. And when Shenango got out of the shipping business in 1969, much of their archives, their corporate archives, wound up on the 3rd floor of the estate, which had been the servants' quarters when you could still afford a staff of 30 people. It's in Pittsburgh, greater Pittsburgh,
Heights, Pennsylvania. So Wilpon Hall was built 1906, same time as the Challenger. Bill's widow, Verna, is family. I hope that she potentially and Marty Maines and his wife Kelly are watching today. He's the estate manager of Wilpon, and they are family. They're Wilpon Hall itself. Go back for you're getting all crazy on me now.
I'm watching the time here. You're not.
So, Wilpon Hall is and was in Pittsburgh the only remaining American industrialist mansion still occupied by the original family for whom it was built for. There was a movie called The Foxcatcher that was filmed there. What's that guy's name?
Steve Carell.
It was Steve Carell and then Magic Mike, whoever that guy is.
It's a weird movie, but yeah.
Channing Tatum.
Yeah.
Bill really got along with Steve Carell and Channing Tatum. He's a pretty cute 97-year-old guy. And they simulated John DuPont's house with Wilpon, but it was that extravagant. The most extravagant part of that place is the attic and the basement. The darkest corners of the basement, the dustiest part of the attic, where literally it was like entering King Tut's tomb of the Shenango Furnace Company.
Yeah, which for Steamboat Geeks.
The archives. I was very blessed that Bill bestowed upon me many of the archives of the Shenango Furnace Company, and Bill supported this book. He knew that it was going to be called Iron Diamonds. The Schoonmaker Foundation donated the funds to publish this book. And the first time that I went for a weekend with Bill and Verna at Wilpon Hall, he didn't tell me, and this is how things go in the shadow of greatness, is that he told me he was having a dinner party in my honor. As a young guy who's been trying to save the museum ship, having a dinner party in your honor with some of the most influential members of Pittsburgh society there. I'll never forget. I didn't want to eat my salad. And this lady says to me, she's like, "You're not eating your salad?" I said, "I'm not eating that." She says, "That's ridiculous." I said, "That's lettuce." I still argue it to this day. I don't know what radicchio is, but I thought it was lettuce. So you take a tugboat guy and a steamboat dude to Sewickley Heights, they've never seen anything like it. So that being said, Bill was my buddy. And that night, he presented me with the builder's plates from the William P. Snyder Jr., both the hull and the engine plate, as well as the christening pennants from each of the Shenango vessels. And what was so cool is that he gave the hull plate to me to give to my father. And so today, and we had a special exhibit here where the plates were on display many years ago. The hull plate, which is hull number 83, the Schoonmaker is 82. That resides in my father's house, and the engine plate in ours. Talk about the magic of the photograph,
Well,
sir.
so it turns out these photos are the originals reside in this beautifully hand lettered folio that was stuffed away in the attic of Wilpon Hall. So here we have the junior on her maiden voyage.
Which the Snyder family took a photographer on their
A
trip.
first-rate photographer with, yes, photos of this quality in this era, which is to say the turn of the century, are quite rare. So here we are, and this is on the William P. Snyder. This is when the aerial lift bridge in Duluth still had the tram instead of the actual traffic span. So this was 1907 coming into Duluth. This is the orchestrion piano on the Shenango, I believe it was. Or
Pause for 1 second. So an orchestrion, this is a Welty orchestrion. If anybody looks up on YouTube, Welty orchestrions, the Snyder family had numerous of them, including in Wilpon Hall. And that is a whole contained band. It's the drums, it's the horns, it's the piano, and it operates like a player piano. One of those was on the Wilpon. Another was on the Shenango. They're the only two lake freighters, or probably vessels, working commercial freight vessels, to have had something like this. Honestly, I urge you, look it up. They actually have one at Disney World and Disneyland. They're very rare, and they sound amazing. But the fact that they were on the Shenango ships, along with all Stickley furniture, all fumed oak paneling, leaded glass, it was because they wanted the passenger quarters of their vessels, where they wined and dined their customers and friends, to be just like Wilpon Hall. The crazy thing about Wilpon Hall, even when you walk in the front main door, the tile is the same that's in the grill room on the Schoonmaker. It is such a cool synergy. It's unbelievable.
The boats had wireless radio, which was unheard of at that time. This is the wireless room on the William P. Snyder. These are just some more. I'm going to spin through these relatively. So there's this whole portion of the book, which are
on the Shenango. I'll let you spin through quick.
Well,
each story.
You've got
you have to have part two.
You've got this whole archival. Many of these photos have never been published.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. That's my favorite picture of all time of the Schoonmaker. It's a picture postcard from 1912 in Huron, Ohio. That is as good as it gets.
Here's a young shot at night, colorized AE young shot at the Sioux in an ice jam. You never see night shots at the turn of the century. Just I stuck in to humor the people in Duluth last year.
This sexy tugboat.
Yeah, and the Shenango. Again, these are just archival. This one was taken. This is one of my all-time favorite boat pictures, taken by Wesley Harkins, who was the photographer of record for the Skilling Mining Journal. This is about as classic 1950s steamboat picture as has ever.
And the original will be in the book. Wes's son has granted us access to the Shenango negatives, and that picture will be essentially rescanned in all its glory in the book.
And then we've had many other people come forth with color images for the book that probably never been published.
that picture and others that are in this series, thanks to Roger LaLivre, the Marine Historical Society of Detroit, and negatives that were donated. We didn't even know what they were to the Marine Historical Society of Detroit at the time. It ended up being the best Shenango archive we've ever seen. And it was Captain Tom Basor. And the pictures are unprecedented. Actually, Chris is picking up the original slides to rescan them, probably do some really high-res stuff for the book, which will be exceptional.
All right, now this is my bag. I'm going to go quick here. So in 2013, my wife and I had purchased very expensive tickets to go on a trip to London when I got a phone call saying, well, the boat is done. They're taking her to Sturgeon Bay under her own power, and she's going to be converted over the winter. This was in 7 years after the book came out, something like that. So I showed up in South Chicago. We canceled our trip, ate the cost of everything. My wife still brings that up. And I got on the boat and this is the last trip under steam from South Chicago up to the shipyard at Sturgeon Bay. So this is 107 years after she was launched. And they gave her the dignity of running her up there instead of towing her up there dead ship. They went up under steam. This is the wheelsman flying the white flag of surrender as we come in to the Sturgeon Bay Ship Canal. There's the ship's bell, which we thought was some generic replacement that had been put on in the 60s when they converted her to a cement carrier, and it turns out not so much. It's the real bell from 1906. Here we are heading in. Last engine orders coming into the slip, blowing down the boilers for the last time, which if you're a steamboat geek, this is a hard thing to watch. And here's another moment of archival stupendousness. Here's a picture from the attic of the crew of the Snyder in 1906. Here's the crew in 2013, 107 years later. And they bitched and complained, but I got them to take this picture. No one wanted to do it. But boy, am I glad they did, because here we are 107 years.
And we were working
later
on and contemplating how the book would move forward when he put that picture
It was
together.
pretty evident that this was a whole second story. Removing the pilot house in the shipyard and the slow melting of a once great steamboat away. The stern was removed, was cut off. The steel in the hull was worn out. The engine was replaced in 1950. It too was worn out. So the hull itself and the unloading equipment is perfectly serviceable. So they cut the stern off, and they now push the hull with a tug, as you'll see in a minute. Here they are fabricating the notch and gluing, Frankensteining together the old and the new. Here's the big sponsons. And then this is what she looks like now, coming into Milwaukee after conversion. So she's still, you can see the lapped and riveted hull there. That's from all of that steel above the waterline is 1906 steel, still serving the trade productively. And now we're at like almost 120 years later. So I'm going to buzz through these two. Pilot House, one of our fine board members here at the National Marine Great Lakes National Museum of the Great Lakes happens to be the president of the Interlake Steamship Company.
I'm lucky Mark Parker still answers my phone calls. Between the propeller that we have out front, the pilot house, any number of different projects he supported us on. I was contacted by Ed Hogan, who is the fleet manager for Port Cities Marine Services, about an appropriate place for the pilot house, and would the National Museum of the Great Lakes be that place. After presenting that and going to visit with our team, which included Carrie, and seeing the pilot house, Chris got to be aboard as the pilot house from the Challenger was put aboard the bow of the Paul Archer Gertha, the largest ship ever to sail fresh water, to be brought to Toledo. This was all about relationships around the Great Lakes, whether it was Bay Shipbuilding Company, Interlake Steamship Company, Midwest Terminals in Toledo, George Grotto Company. It was representative of the very history that we were trying to preserve here.
Loading the pilot house at the shipyard. Here we are loading iron ore for Toledo here at Escanaba. That dock is now gone, sadly. Yeah, I agree. There's the views inside the pilot house up on the deck there. Coming down Detroit River, headed for Toledo. pulling into CSX. Some lovely weather that evening. Pea soup fog the next morning. I don't think a 1,000-footer has ever been that far upriver. So the captain was a little bit, it was a bit tense that morning. And then the house was stored over at, I forget the name of the terminal.
International
for
was
some
hugely
years.
supportive of us.
We took the bell and the name boards off so that they wouldn't be stolen. And then Uncle Paulie cleaned the bell up, and sure enough, it is the original bell with William P. Snyder is cast right into the face of the bell.
So before you get too quick here, the bell, which this was 2 days after arrival. I was supposed to ride the ship with Chris and was out of town. So, of course, that's how it always works out. But we wanted to remove the name boards, the bell, the wheel, the other artifacts to ensure that while it was sitting at Midwest, that they didn't walk off. And the bell, as you can see, taking down the paint to the various layers. I have never had such an Indiana Jones moment in my life where I've got you have to do this very carefully and have a DA sander, stripper, and of course, I think there's some beer showing there as well, which is an important part of that mix. And as the first letter S started showing, I was texting Chris pictures, and I'm calling him. I'm like, dude, it's the original bell. I told you, it's the original bell. And really, it was, and you can see it. And of course, the bell is now in our new exhibit. But it's those moments with historic preservation that are just, they get in your soul. You want to find more of it. It is a puzzle piece. It's preservation that is unprecedented.
And I happened to be at a barbecue with the first mate when Paul was calling and texting, and he was like, "Oh yeah, he'd been on the ship since 1969. Oh yeah, I knew that." He's like, you never asked me," and I was like, "What?" He was not impressed.
And the other thing, the single most important part of this story is the friendships and the relationships that have come out of it. And the other day we were starting to proof some pages, and I didn't see this picture in there, and I said, "Dude, that picture of you and I with the wheelhouse and the name boards better be in there," because it is the heart of what is telling the story together.
I always like living history. So the last boat in the Shenango Fleet, their last carrier that was built in 1959 was the Shenango II, and is now the James Oberstar, which you may see here from time to time. One new thing we have at our fingertips in this book is the drone, which did not exist. Did not exist.
It's for doing things like this. The other thing is that when you take your lovely wife for her first ferry trip, doing it at the end of October, early November, she had never seen the fall colors in the St. Mary's River. She had also never seen a gale on Lake Superior. It was good that she had taken her Dramamine when the furniture was flying across the living room. But the coolest thing was it was right on the cusp of, I was probably on my 3rd or 4th drone at that point. I've got them in all Great Lakes except Ontario and Lake St. Clair. But somebody's going to find those SD cards someday, and it's going to be amazing. But these pictures in 40 to 60 mile an hour winds, in 15-foot waves, and a gale on Lake Superior, nothing has been taken like it before or since.
Paul was an F-18 pilot?
I was.
I think that's clever.
That was a time before I had really figured it out. We're actually going to try to go out on the Oberstar in November, hoping to get some real action shots because we've learned a lot. But this was a crash operation. This was a get the shot, pray you're going to get the drone back and crash it on the deck. But pretty exceptional stuff.
And then the final step, bringing the pilothouse from the terminal to the museum. And here, okay. Oh, all right.
Almost down to the end here.
Carrie's giving me the stink eye back there.
Well, that's all right. We've got like a handful more slides. You can't like rush it at the very end, man. So we'll get this down better. But it's part of the magic of our relationship. His daughter, Ryerson, is my goddaughter. And if any of you have ever seen Sopranos with Uncle Paulie, I am Uncle Paulie to Ryerson and the kids, according to Chris. So, Challenger Pilot House. Captain Joe Cialetti, who's back here with the Cialetti family and George Grotto Company, running the tug, George Grotto, which also does our Christmas tree ship event here at the museum. We're getting ready. Chris came out. The pilot house had been loaded. We're getting ready to leave Grotto's dock up by the CSX bridge. And what do we hear on the radio? You couldn't plan this in a million years. Impossible. If we had tried to plan it, there is no way. Who is calling for the bridge that we are about to pull out in front of? The St. Mary's Challenger. Literally, you can see her right there. The vessel itself followed us up the river to the National Museum of the Great Lakes. Unreal.
Thank you, drone. Once again, you never get a shot like that without a drone.
And what's even more amazing is that in this picture, and literally that day, I had the chance, as we are literally craning the pilot house down, of having hands on it and setting it down onto the pad. Not only did we have our team from the museum and George Grotto Company, but we had the actual current captain of the Challenger there who came over from just docking the ship. Again, you can't make these things up. Restaurate.
Rough shape.
Oh my gosh. I still kind of have nightmares. I've got like pilot house PTSD, pilot house distress disorder. Of course, the expansion and the second wave, the pilot house getting joined to the museum. This man has put on more miles between Milwaukee and Toledo, and he's the only person that is allowed to sleep over at my house on our couch. He is like family to our golden retrievers, and that's where he'll be residing tonight. Literally, that Fitzgerald book was a lot of days on my couch, and I'll let you talk about these last photos here.
Well, it was a big day for both of us. 22 years of my life and probably Paul's whole life. The dedication of that pilot house. As I mentioned, I was real frustrated back in 2006. I could not get anyone jazzed about the Challenger.
We're jazzed.
But we're pretty jazzed now. And there's a lot of people that seem to be also jazzed. So we came over and
come on, man.
Well,
you're killing me here. So this is where you have to give credit to the artist who, there's our William P. Snyder Bell that we restored, and there's the reflection of Chris's son Anderson in the bell in the picture. His talent, when I say he's my favorite photographer, he really is. His talent is unprecedented. His artwork that he produces, he's very humble, but those are the things that set every publication he's had his hands on apart and will set this one apart.
And it is edifying to imagine handing something off to the next generation. And for me, it's especially poignant because I was involved most of my younger years with the creation of the SV Dennis Sullivan, which was the only three-masted tall ship ever built in the recent history. And we lost the ship in 2020 during the pandemic. And so I feel like a big part of my life just was sucked out of Milwaukee and off the Great Lakes. And so this project has become sort of somewhere where I can say my kids can come back here when they're older, and they may have some memories here and something we can pass off to younger folks. There they are. That's Paul and his wife, and then my three kids there on the
most important slide, man. Paul and his wife. That is it.
I was gonna go
if
back.
there's one slide in the oh man, you're in trouble now. You got to sleep on our couch tonight. So, honestly, that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, we're all trying to work with purpose, but take care of the people that we love and do it in a meaningful way. And so National Museum of the Great Lakes is giving me the opportunity to do that. And it is the gathering place of the Great Lakes where these stories will continue to evolve. And of course, Anderson at the wheel, who would have thought when this man was on a bridge on the Calumet River in Chicago in a dangerous neighborhood in a beat up old Toyota with a camera that he mortgaged his house for in the freezing cold. Who would have thought that his son would be standing at the wheel of that ship at the National Museum of the Great Lakes?
It's a bit much to
family
hope
and
for.
friends. And of course, there's my goddaughter Ryerson at the wheel, cutting the ribbon with Mark Barker, who's been so gracious through the whole project.
Sorry, a little out of order there.
No, that's all right. The pilothouse restoration, but this is another important part for me. And
this is the last slide.
We're gonna.
My wife gives me a hard time about talking too much, so I have that in the back of my head.
For me, as the port director for Monroe, when I took the job 13 years ago, my number one condition of accepting and taking the job is that I would not walk away from the museum and the ship, that I will be part of the ship's existence for as long as I am able to do that, physically and mentally, and hopefully for the rest of my life. And without the support, one of my port commissioners, Dave Gelwitz, is here today. Without the support of the Port of Monroe and the things that we've been able to accomplish there, I wouldn't be able to do this today. So I'm very thankful always for the foundation that provides me to hopefully tell the story of the Great Lakes, past, present, and future. And though I interrupted him many times and made our presentation go longer, this is my brother. And the book, when it does come out, which we're hoping for the spring, life happens, of course. So it's taken a little bit longer than expected, but it will be well worth it. There will not be a fleet history or compendium have been done on any fleet in Great Lakes history like this. So stick with us. Come back to see Chris on November 8th. And thank you for supporting the National Museum of the Great Lakes.
Any questions?
How many megapixels on the camera?
That was part of the crippling. How many megapixels on my cameras is the question. My camera is bigger than your camera. It started out, the Mark I was 12 megapixels. This was in 2003. It cost $10,000. It was obsolete 18 months later, and they came out with the 5D Mark I. So I bought that first camera for $10,000. I sold it 18 months later for $1,000. That was all I could get for
Worth
it.
every penny.
Then it went to 16 megapixels. The Mark II, the Mark III was 22. Currently my flagship is a 5D Mark IV, and that is 32 megapixels. So that is equal to, if you were familiar with film formats, like a medium format, like a Hasselblad camera. The 5D Mark IV is about comparable in its resolution, so that you can make a book size, for instance, is 10 inches by 10 inches. You can make a full frame print at 100% and not have to use any math to make it bigger. So the resolution, the critical sharpness is 100%. I will say, in the process of building the new Fitzgerald book, there is now finally AI-driven algorithmic software that will upscale photos in a way that is totally invisible now. You can take the smallest thumbnails, and it's not always 100% successful, but it's all like black math, and it interpolates all the pixels and
Even
grows them.
black and white.
It's a remarkable. So I cite that only to continue to drive home the point that it's so exciting to have new tools and to interpret a subject that is, it's 150 years old. The Great Lakes maritime history has been around a long time, but we're able to do some things with tools that like a drone or some of the software or digital cameras to observe and interpret in a way that would not have been possible, certainly in the first part of my career.
Online question?
Over the years, what's the total number of boats that were the Shenango Fleet at any time, at one time or another throughout their existence?
6. The Shenango Furnace Fleet originally had 5 vessels. William P. Snyder in 1906, Wilpin in 1907, Shenango in 1909, Colonel James M. Schoonmaker in 1911, William P. Snyder Jr. in 1912. And then there was a huge gap until 1960 when William P. Snyder III commissioned the Shenango II, which was built right here at the Toledo shipyard.
Yes, sir.
Honestly, the question was, why did the museum, the Great Lakes Historical Society, move from Vermilion to Toledo for the National Museum of the Great Lakes? Vermilion, the Wakefield House, was an awesome community. It still is. It is where our foundation, where our roots as an organization existed. The challenge is that to sustain historic preservation, which when you're competing with AI and video games and cell phones, the key is you have to make it more engaging and you have to put it right next to a major highway in a metropolis that has significantly more potential to attract visitors, but also to collaborate with other cultural institutions. And so that was the key. It wasn't that we didn't love Vermilion, it was that we needed to survive. The wheelhouse is no longer out there. It's actually at a private business from the Canopus, but it does still exist. It was not scrapped. Jack, and then you're next.
What was the demise of the company?
The demise of the fleet, while Shenango still existed and even operated on Neville Island in Pittsburgh for many, many years, it was in the families that were engaged in the steel industry over the course of history. It was a change of interest by ownership. And ultimately, Bill Snyder would have told you up till the very end that he never wanted to get rid of the vessels, ever. But it was a family decision and it wasn't his.
Integrated companies started to fall out of favor by the 1970s. That was part of it. In some ways, I think it was smart business. Steel company started to realize that it wasn't the most efficient way to be structured to also own and operate their own steamboats. You could charter vessels to do the same job. That was an ongoing at the whole industry, another quantum shift from about 1970 to the present day. Everything we had known, we understood about Great Lakes shipping changed drastically. Ma'am, you had a question?
Yeah, the three-masted ship you were talking about in Milwaukee when you said it was gone.
Yeah.
Did it sink? What happened?
No, thankfully it wasn't that bad. I sometimes wish it had. No, it went to, the museum was under such economic duress due to the COVID pandemic that they gave it to another nonprofit. It operates now out of Boston Harbor.
And they say give because there's no such thing as a free boat.
That's for sure, especially a wooden ship. Yeah. Yeah, but the one stipulation we put on it was you got to keep the name the same and it has to always be home port Milwaukee. So we have that at least.
Sure.
How deep was the water around the border?
How deep was it?
Yeah.
What's interesting is it really wasn't that bad back when, it had silted in. The problem was how much water she had in her. And the water that she had in her when I first came aboard, everyone said, oh, the boiler's sinking, just like it was stuck in the mud. And what it actually was 20 plus years of hull sweat on the starboard side without the ballast tanks being vented. And so what you had is that the sun rose every day and was on that side of the ship for the majority of the day. You had condensate across that whole 617-foot hull that every day that condensate would just build up over 20 years. That 20 years led to 60,000 gallons. We pumped her out. The tanks are still vented at this very moment, and she is dry as can be. And it raised her significantly.
I was one of the doubters. So
You were one of the doubters?
red doubter on it to get it moving again.
You son of a gun. No, it's great. Dude, that makes it even better that
Is
you're
there going to be trouble here tonight?
No, that's awesome because there were guys on the dock that day. I'm on the it's not gonna lie. That wasn't you, I don't think. You got a nicer voice than that. So, honestly, when she came away from the dock, that's when the tears flowed because that was really the monumental movement in all of this.
Could the Schoonmaker run now?
The Schoonmaker could not run now through abatement of asbestos. The steam engine not running in a very long time. The interesting thing is that there are a few ships on the lakes that up until a couple of years ago are still using almost the exact same engine room. If you go in the steamer Alpina today, it's almost identical. It looks just like the Schoonmaker. We've given parts to various companies over the years that are essentially irreplaceable. And then we've also had other companies try to steal our hatch crane and other pieces of equipment that we've not let that happen because the hatch crane and other things still work, and it's pretty cool.
All right, I got a comment.
Comment.
The captain, Tom, what was his last name?
Tom Besor.
Besor?
Besor.
Okay. Those pictures came from a person that went to a garage sale, actually.
Okay.
And she got them. Her name is Georgianne Walker.
Okay. I'm sure Roger has that. No, you
No,
don't.
he does not. No, he does not have it.
Okay.
Okay. Then they sat in my house for maybe 4 years.
That's where they came from. Okay.
And then-
Awesome.
I contacted him, and I still got one reel I had to go through to give you. Yeah, I got
Well,
one
thank
more
you.
reel to give you. But it come from a garage sale, believe it or not. And she was in the area where he lived.
Isn't that unreal?
Yes,
And
and
thank you for saving it. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'd like to give you a big hug right now. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, but
That's awesome.
I just wanted you to let you know that it was a woman that went to a garage sale.
If you could,
Georgianne.
we want to get that story from you because that will be part of the book.
Okay, well, her and her husband had wrote, I believe, 3 books on Lake Erie shipwrecks.
Okay.
They're at the, I don't know if you sell them in your museum or not. I think we do.
Don't think we do right now.
I know, he's, anyways, I
Okay.
have them, but I just, she was one that discovered them, thought they were valuable, and then she kept them for a while, and then she gave them to me, and then.
Well, we want to see the rest of them, mister.
And fast.
I was going through it myself, trying to figure out where these pictures were. In fact, the ones I gave him, I labeled as much as possible, but I.
They're outstanding. Never seen anything like it.
Okay,
She's giving us the hook.
I'm giving you guys.
No. Hurry up, music.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you so much for Paul and Chris. This was excellent and really a lot of fun. As always, thank you to Impact Employment Solutions for sponsoring our fall lecture series. Next month on Wednesday, November 19th, we will welcome Stephanie Campo, the Associate Vice President of Stakeholder and Community Relations at Windsor Detroit Bridge Authority. And I thought I had a long title. Sue's going to give us a sneak peek at the new Gordie Howe Bridge that's crossing the Detroit River. This will be a virtual lecture, but we will be hosting a viewing party here at the museum for anybody who's interested. Prior to that, the weekend before, between November 7th and 10th, we will be commemorating the tragic loss of the Yeoman Fitzgerald and the 29 sailors on board with a full slate of events. Please pick up a flyer. We've got a flyer here for all of our events. If you are interested in any of these, please start signing up quickly because some of them are starting to fill up very quickly. If you are not a member of the National Museum of the Great Lakes, now is a great time to join at nmgl.org/membership. And thank you again to Paul, sorry, Paul's over here, Chris, for everything for tonight. And thank you to all of you for coming, and stay healthy and be safe. And we will see you in November.